welcome to Crime in Court. We are reading through the Delphi trial transcript, Indiana versus Richard Allen in the homicides of Libby German and Abby Williams. This is the state's case, part 19, and we are going to be reading through the testimony of Kathy Shank, who is she's a volunteer who basically found the tip, the tip that we're not allowed to know, that eventually led to Richard Allen's arrest. And it came 5 years after the homicides. So I don't know. So we're going to read through that testimony and then we're going to start the testimony of Captain Dan Dulin. But we're not going to get through it. I think we're just going to get through a portion of his direct or some of his, or through his direct, and then we'll have to continue tomorrow because it'll be too long otherwise. So, all right, so let us get started. I am trying to go no glasses today. I really hate the glare from my computer and everything, how it makes my, you guys can't see my eyes. I need them to read because my eyes get strained. So if eventually, I'm just gonna try and see how this goes without it. And if I decide I need them, I'll put them back on because I already am seeing kind of some. I can see it's just, my eyes get strained after a while. Like it's like my eyes get tired. They're too tired after reading, so we may need to put them back on. But anyways, let's get started. So I'm on the wrong transcript here. That would be the problem. All right, so we're on Kathy Shank direct testimony we're about to get to. So let me shrink myself here and let's get started. So we're going to pick up basically where we left off last time, which we went off the record for. It was October 23rd, 2024. So now we are heading into October 24th, 2024. It is 9:02 a.m. and we're back on the record for a new day. The court says, all right, well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We are back on the record in the state of Indiana versus Richard Allen. I'll show the defendants here in person with counsel. State is here by the prosecutor and his deputies. We are outside the presence of the jury, and the jury has been reassembled. Are we ready to proceed, Mr. McLeland? Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Rosie? Yes. Let's go. The bailiff says, all rise. The jury enters the room. The bailiff says, thank you. You may be seated. The court responds and says, thank you. I'll always give you time in the morning, ladies and gentlemen, to get your things out and get ready before we start the process. Take your time and please let Jody know if you need any additional pens or paper or anything like that, okay? All right. Well, good. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is nice to see you back here this morning. I know when we part company, I give you the admonishment. I know over the evening, under the supervision of all three of our bailiffs, one of which who is not here today, throughout the course then of the evening, you've had access to your phones to communicate with your families and to check work emails and kind of touch base with everybody. So, in light of that, have you read, seen, or heard any media accounts concerning this case? All the jurors answer in the negative. The court says, have you discussed this case with anyone? All jurors respond in the negative. She has not done this every day, by the way. I don't know if maybe they just had they had the option the night before to talk to family. Maybe they don't have the option every night to do that. I don't know. But I don't think she does this every morning asking them these questions. Have you permitted anyone to discuss the case with you? All say no. And have you conducted any research into this case? All say no. Has anybody persisted in attempting to discuss this case with you? All say no. Court says okay. And again, I appreciate your continued compliance with the court orders so that you make a decision on the evidence and not on any extraneous outside information. We are ready to proceed. Ms. Diener. You may call your next witness. Ms. Diener says the state will call Kathy Shank. So we begin cross examination. Ms. Diener will be doing the questions for the state. All right. She says, okay, would you please state your first and last name and spell both of them for the court reporter? And she does. Are you a Delphi native? I was originally from Flora. You guys might remember Flora from the Flora fires, which happened, I want to say, almost like a year prior, maybe even more, prior to the homicides of Abby and Libby. And considering they're like the only homicides of children in the town for however many years or whatever, like uh, they may be linked or connected in some way. There's a lot of theories about it, and I don't know enough about it to really um, tell you what happened, other than I know that four little girls' lives were lost in a house fire that one evening. All four daughters of one poor mother who lost all four of her children in one night, and they were all African American in like a poor town. Flora, I don't think is. Yeah, I don't think Delphi is a very lucrative town either. Like these are not. These are all small towns. So I don't know. I don't know if there was any connection. I'm just telling you that I know there's some speculation that there is a connection there somewhere. Anyways, it's just weird that Kathy Shank's from Flora. She says, I was originally from Flora. I lived in Delphi 40 years. I am now in Florida. Flora, yes. Okay. But you're very familiar with Delphi? Very familiar with Carroll County, yes. And how did you become familiar with Carroll County? Well, I was raised here, and I attended Purdue University for 4 years. And then once I graduated from Purdue, I acquired a job with at the time, the county run welfare department back in 71. That is now known as the Department of Child Services. And I was with them for 40 years. So she worked at the welfare department. It was called that in 71. It's now known as the Department of Child Services. And she worked for them for 40 years. So that's her background. And so when you worked for 40 years with the Department of Child Services, was that servicing the area of Carroll County? Primarily, yes. And did that job involve you working in conjunction with or getting to know local law enforcement? I worked with them quite extensively during those years, yes. Now, in 2017, specifically February of 2017, were you still working for the Department of Child Services? No, I was not. Were you retired? Yes, I had left there after 40 years in 2011. Did you at some point become involved in assisting with the Abby Williams and Libby German death investigation? Yes, I did. And how did you become involved? I was in Florida in February, and when this horrible tragedy occurred, I think there was breaking news over the telephone, and I followed that through to the first press conference I believe that I saw. And because I had worked with law enforcement and with the former prosecutor, Rob Ives, and I knew Rob well, he had been our attorney for some time through the department, and I contacted Rob and I said, I would really like to help in any way that I can. And then returned home the end of February. And on March 1st of 2017, I began working with this investigation. So there you have it. She knew the former prosecutor who was working on this case, the Delphi homicides, not knowing who the perpetrator was, but at that time. And well, we still don't, in my opinion. And so Rob Ives was the DA prior to Nicholas McLeland on this case. And I don't know if he recused himself or what happened to Rob Ives. That's an interesting thing, an interesting angle to look into. But anyways, he is no longer on the case. Obviously, Nicholas McLeland took it over, but back in 2017, she had connections to the DA's office. So think of that what you will. And did you work as a volunteer at that point? Yes. And did you continue to volunteer up until the present time? Yes, I did. When you came to help with the case, tell us in what capacity you were helping in March of 2017. I was initially assigned to be basically a receptionist. We were at that time at what is now considered the old REMC building here in town, and I was placed behind the counter. And when persons would come in and with tips regarding the situation, I would greet them, and then I would refer them to a detective who would come downstairs and speak with them about their tip. And then would you pass that information along to law enforcement, the information of the name and the contact number? Yes. We had what we called an information sheet at that time where I would write down their name and their identifying information and just a summary of what they would like to speak with the detective about. And then I would take that information upstairs where the detectives were, and a detective would come down and speak with them at that time. This REMC building, was that a building that was normally used in relationship to police investigations, if you know? Not, obviously, not initially. It was the REMC headquarters. They had moved, and I believe this was prior to me coming in on March 1st. The initial investigation, I believe, was up at the city building, and there was numerous officers there, and it was a very cramped quarters for them. And the old REMC, then they graciously agreed to allow us to be there. Now, from your position at the reception desk, did you have a sense of how many law enforcement officers were working on this case? I'm going to give you a best guesstimate. Obviously, I don't know for sure, but there were 50 or more coming in and out of there at that time. And at that time, did you have any idea who was working on what? No. With regards to the investigation? No, I was primarily downstairs. Okay. And you indicate that you've been assisting on a volunteer basis since March of 2017 until now. Was there a point when you took on a responsibility, were given more responsibility? Yes, there was. And who was it that decided they would give you additional duties? At this point, I can't exactly remember who decided to give me the special duties, but as I was given the responsibility of numerous bankers' boxes full of investigative reports, and I'm an organizer, so they decided possibly I could arrange these in a way that would be easily accessible to the detectives. And so at that point, I asked one of the detectives, could you please get me filing cabinets, which they did. They went to Purdue, got 5 filing cabinets, and I sat down at a card table. And at that time, was asked to put these reports or narrative summaries, as I call them, into a file folder, labeling them with the name of what we called person of interest. So let's take that back one sec. I asked one of the detectives, could you please get me filing cabinets? And they did. They went to Purdue, got me 5 filing cabinets. And I sat down at a card table. And at that card table was asked to put these reports, all of these reports or narrative summaries, as I call them, into file folders, labeling them with the name of what we called person of interest. Okay? I just wanted to reiterate that because that's, I think, an important part. And the name that you would put on the folder could be a witness, could be a person of interest. Did you have any idea? I had no idea. I was just looking at names. At that time, I was directed not to get into exactly the report narrative, but just look at a name and place it in a file folder. And were you doing this? You sat at a card table. Was this in the REMC building? Yes, it was. And do you know how many file folders you created? 5 filing cabinets jam packed full. And when you say filing cabinets, are we talking about metal file cabinets that you, 5, would use in an office? Yes, yes. And that have multiple drawers each? Yes. Now, when you created these folders, did the tab on the folder just have a first and last name? Sometimes a middle name, but yes. Okay, and was there anything else you were directed to do in creating those folders? No, not at the time. Okay. And so you were the only one making the folders. No, a former coworker of mine and a friend of mine was vetted as well to be able to put the names on the folders, but again, we were both instructed not to read the reports, just to put the names on the file folders. Okay. And when you say vetted, did you have to have some sort of background check? No, not necessarily. I had worked with law enforcement throughout the years and they felt comfortable with me doing that. What? What does that mean? Like, oh, like law enforcement allowed this person to do it, so they must have vetted her? That makes no sense. Or them? I don't know. That, whatever. Okay. And did they do the same thing with Carol, to your knowledge? Same, very same thing. Okay. Do you know when you started making this file system? Not exactly. It was sometime after, obviously. I had just been greeting people and doing the tips. They decided that they were slowing down a bit with people coming in at the time and felt that I could be more benefit to them. And that's when they brought the boxes of reports down and asked me to begin that. So, were you doing that particular task the same time you were being a receptionist at the REMC building? Yes, I was. Did you at some point finish the file folders and then you were just doing it on an ongoing basis? Took me a while, but yes, eventually we finished. Yes. And that meant that the bankers' boxes that were brought to you for to fill, full of, I'm sorry, the banker boxes that were brought to you full of narrative reports or lead sheets were put into folders. Yes, ma'am. And then you take on an additional responsibility? Yes. And what was that additional responsibility? I was requested to enter narrative summaries that had been completed by various officers into a database. And how did you receive these narrative summaries? The narrative summaries were many times already they were in the reports and I was looking to put together narrative summary in there in that report at that time. And what were you doing that? Did it further organize the information by putting it into the database? The database required a covered lead section, and I was wanting to complete those sections, and that's what I was doing. Okay, so when a lead came in, how was it distinguished from another lead or in your database? It was distinguished by a numbering system. Okay, so did each lead get a number assigned to it? Yes, it did. And was that done within the database? Yes. Was that database used for cases outside of the Abby Williams and Libby German investigation? Absolutely not. Like she's adamant it was not. And so I don't know why that was like a touchy question. She could have just said no. And so you said you would enter narrative summaries into this database. Yes. Did you enter anything else into the database? Once I began doing that and we had moved from the REMC to the city building here in Delphi, I was asked to begin entering tips into the database. Well, did you have to be given special access to receive the tips? They were forwarded to me and then I entered them initially. And how were they forwarded to you? through, I believe now, Sheriff Tony Liggett was receiving those. There were several officers receiving them, and now Sheriff Liggett stated, Kathy, you can do this, no problem, and showed me how to do it, taught me how to do it, and I began entering those tips into the database, and then eventually they were forward. I was part of the Abby Williams and Libby German referral line, so they could just come directly to me through the tip line. Okay, so a tip line would receive information, yes, and they would come to you in what format? Through the email, the email system. Okay, yes. Now, you said at this point you've moved from the REMC building to the city building, is that correct? Correct. And at that point, you're entering information into the computer database. Correct. Who would you go to with questions or who was giving you direction about your tasks? Generally, there was what was called a unified command. There were different detectives, there different days, whomever happened to be there at the time. Tony Liggett, the current sheriff, was probably my main go-to person, but there were others and I would ask questions if I had questions because it wasn't my responsibility only to look at them. It was their decisions to make. Would you Did you notice that they were at this point, and I don't know if you know the year in which we're talking, but there were less law enforcement present to work on these tips as they came in? Yes. There was quite a difference between working at the REMC building and when we moved to over to the city. Quite a difference between working at the REMC building and when we moved over to the city building. It became more of a cohesive group than of unified command within the detectives and that have worked on that since that time. It became more of a cohesive group than of unified command when they moved to the city building. So if you remember, Unified Command are people like Holman, Liggett, Mullen, like all the head guys in this case, all the lead detective type. Well, they're not all lead detectives, but you know what I mean, like all the main players, the main law enforcement guys. We've got people from Carroll County, from Delphi police, from ISP. So like all there's people from all of the groups, all of the different organizations have combined into unified command. So that's what that is. So what happened to your file cabinet system once you started entering these things into the computer? Where was it? It moved with me to the city building and still exists today. Absolutely. Yes. At that time, when you received information, did you receive it and put it only into the computer database, or was it also put in a file cabinet in a folder? When I received the tip information, it went into a database. Okay. And were you then asked to do something more with the file cabinet information? Yes. And do you remember when that was? That was approximately, I would guess, I'm going to say around September of 2020. Okay. And so, what did you do with the file cabinet information? I was asked then to begin scanning the information from each file into the database. So now she's just scanning the notes and sheets, the actual paper into the database. And so at this time, you were creating a duplicate of your file cabinet file system in the computer? Yes, the tips obviously were in there, and I would say a majority of the narrative summaries I had entered in there that I had access to that were there, that there were, but there were other documents within the file folders that needed to be scanned into the database. And how long did it take you to scan all of the file folders and put it in the computer system? Approximately 2 years. Okay, that's a long time. Was she like, okay? I'm sure I could have done it in a lot less, no matter how many baker's boxes. And while you were doing that, were you reading content of every file folder as you put it in the computer system? Not everyone, no. So she was standing there reading them as she. No wonder it took her 2 years. And so, were you working on this project? Where were you working? Sorry, so where were you working on this project? Well, it began at the city building, but then once they needed the rooms that we were in the city building, we had to find another location. And so then this home base for the investigation moved again? Yes, it did. How many times you moving? Then all your cabinets move with you? Absolutely. They were my filing cabinets. I was very protective of them. Bitch, you are a volunteer for the state. They're not your filing cabinets and they're not the information in them is not yours either. This is disturbing. I don't know if I asked you this already, but how long did it take you to put to put the file cabinet information into the computer system? She says 2 years again. Okay, now after you get done with the filing cabinet scans, do you know at that point how many tips or leads you've processed? My best, the last time I looked, which the database did show the number of tips that I had entered, it was over 14,000. So there were a lot of tips, but I still don't think it should have taken 2 years. But like she must not have been working very often or very long days or uh, just very, very, very slow in her movement. And do you work on this all day, every day, like a regular job? No, I would regularly go in probably around 12:30, 1 and stay until 5:30. Still, you have like 4 hours you could be 4 or 5 hours that you could be putting scanning information. Good scanners nowadays don't take that long. Anywho, or six, depending on most days, 5 days a week. So she'd be working an entire afternoon, 5 days a week. Now, after you finished the filing cabinet scans, were you working on something that led to the attention being brought to Richard Allen? Yes, I was. Can you explain what you were doing that led to that? Yes. When we had moved from the city building to our current location, I had brought with me materials that I had not yet gone through to determine exactly what they were and where they needed to go, whether it needed to be filed, whether it needed to go to other detectives for review. As I was doing that, I had located a box, which what I would call would be like a file folder box that I had placed in my desk drawer for further perusal when I had finished scanning. And I began going through that box and when I noticed that basically I was observing handwritten tip numbers and my concern was that these tip numbers needed to coordinate with the tip numbers that had previously been entered into the system prior to me. I hadn't done any handwritten tip numbers. Mine were all directly from the Abby Williams and Libby German tip line, and I entered them directly into the database. So these were written out prior to me. I didn't know by whom or when, and I wanted to ensure that they would coordinate because I didn't want to miss any tips that had been entered. In this case, or in case there would be an important tip that needed to be reviewed. And as I went through the box, that's when I found a lead sheet. She found a lead sheet. Okay. So she finds all these tips that were handwritten that she was like, "Oh crap, I already did all these in the data or these numbers might have already been used in the database, whatever, whatever." She's like, "I don't want to miss anything." So she comes back and then goes through and finds a lead sheet. This lead sheet supposedly leads them back to Richard Allen, which now makes him a suspect somehow, some way. And so at this point, your role has changed, I would say, significantly from when you started as a receptionist. Is that correct? Yes, it did. And at this point in the investigation, because you were maybe brought into the fold a little bit by doing the tasks with the documents, you had more information about just general facts. Would that be true? That's correct. And so when you came across a particular lead sheet, what was it that caught your attention? This lead sheet stated that I believe it was February the 16th is when it was entered that a Richard Allen Whiteman had self-reported being out on the trails between the hours of 1:30 and 3:30 and had seen the girls. Three girls, sorry. And so, why did that catch your attention at this point? I had previously read that a young girl on February 13th of 2017 had been on the trails and had seen a man at that approximate time and place that he had self-reported earlier. That's what we're going with. That's why this stuck out to you. First of all, he didn't say 1:30 to 3:30. He actually said, I think it was 12:30 to 1:30, and he was gone by then. By the time the girls even got there. But somehow this makes him suspicious again, or for the first time back in 2020, even though law enforcement already cleared him the first time around. So why was this a particular concern to you when you read the Richard Allen Whiteman self-report? To me, it seemed like a possible correlation. Obviously, I wasn't privy to a lot of information, but it just seemed like there could be a correlation enough to cause me to take that concern to a filing cabinet, which would have been labeled Richard Allen Whiteman, and I pulled the file, and that's how I put it together. So, because you mislabeled the file somehow, you're like, oh, this is our guy. You mislabeled him Richard Allen Whiteman. Whiteman is a street he lived on. So that would be somebody, maybe not her, but somebody incorrectly labeled it. So the tip you had in your hand from the box of miscellaneous documents you were checking on, you then compared to the file cabinet file. Is that correct? Correct. And is there some significance to the fact that the box was from a tip that came in February of 2017 with relationship to the work you were doing? I honestly don't know how that lead ended up in that box. I do not know. Well, were you helping with the case in February of 2017? I was, but I was helping with it, but I don't know how that exact lead sheet became in that box. Okay. She doesn't know how the exact lead sheet got in the box. Is how you would say that, but whatever. I had filed, obviously, a lead, and the narrative I found at some point way back in 2017, but I certainly hadn't remembered it by that time. So she says she filed the lead and the narrative, but she doesn't remember. Okay, so she says she filed it, so then she is the one that mislabeled it, most likely. Okay. Well, I thought you said you didn't start helping with the case until March 1st of 2017. I did. I'm sorry if I said February. I apologize. So, if this lead sheet was created in February of 2017, that was created prior to your starting to help. Is that correct? Yes, I started March 1st of 2017. Were there other things in the box that were from before March 1st of 2017? I assume so because these handwritten tip numbers would have been done prior to my knowledge of that. Because as I stated, when I received a tip on the Abby and Libby tip line, I would enter those directly myself. I did not write them down as far as being my way of entering them. And so, was it your understanding then that handwritten tip lead numbers existed before the database you were using? I assume so, or they were writing them in conjunction with, but I don't know that for sure. You don't know that. Okay, so you go to the file and it's labeled Richard Allen Whiteman with Whiteman as the last name? Correct. So it's filed under W. Correct. And when you go to that file folder, do you find something that has increased your attention to this tip? Yes, I did. And what was that? There had been a narrative summary entered in the database prior to me. It was entered in February and stating that Richard Allen had been interviewed and lived on Whiteman Drive. So, did that information coincide with the tip number for Richard Allen Whiteman? Yes, it did. And at the time it was put in that folder, were you reading the content of the tips or narratives? No, I was just labeling them. And was there something about the tip that related to you never going back to that particular file until this time? I had no reason to. I had cleared the tip narrative or lead narrative, as I called it, that I found had the word cleared on it. Okay, so she just corrected herself and said I had cleared. And then she's like, wait a minute, no, not me. The word cleared was on the lead sheet, and I had developed a system of coding those files who were cleared by a green mark on the file, and this had a green mark, and that's why. So it was ignored this whole time because it was cleared. So he was cleared by police, unless Kathy cleared him, like she almost said. And so it was not your job to decide if something was cleared. Is that correct? Oh, no, 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 not at all. And it wasn't your job to decide who followed up on a tip. Is that correct? No, not at all. Organizing the information, would that be fair? That's fair. What did you do with the documents that you found? I believe Tony was the chief deputy at that time. One of our directors, Tony Liggett, and Tony and I happened to be at the center when I found this, and I took this information to Tony to have him look at it. Okay. At that point, did you make any changes to your file folder with regard to the name and where it was placed in the file cabinet? Not that day, but later I did. And what did you do? I changed it to Richard Allen. And so then it became filed in the A's? Well, it wasn't ever filed back in the filing cabinet. It was given to Tony Liggett at that time. Okay. Do you know when you made that discovery? Yes, I do. And what day did you make that discovery? It was on September 21st of 2022. Now, some people might think it's odd that you remember that day. Can you tell us why you remember it? Yes, I can. This was the date of my deceased's husband's birthday. Judge, may I approach the witness? The court says you may. Kathy, I'm going to show you what's marked as State's Exhibit 228. It has 3 pages. Please look at all of them. Do you recognize those documents? I do. Do they accurately reflect an image of the manila file folder that you created and your notes on that file folder in the tab area? Yes. And does it also accurately reflect the 2 pages that you found in the physical folder when you went to look for it on September 22nd of 2022? Yes. Did I say the date right? September 21st. 21st. I apologize. Yes. This was the initial sheet that I found, and then the second sheet was in the file folder. They were both in the file folder. This is the one I found in the box. Okay. The first one is the one you found in the box? Yes. And then you went to the folder and both of them were there? Yes. State would move to admit Exhibit 228 and publish it to the jury. Mr. Baldwin says no objection. The court says all right, without objection, admitted, and you may publish. Judge, once the jury has had an opportunity to take a look at that, I would pass the witness. Okay, all right, Mr. Baldwin, you may cross. Mr. Baldwin says, thank you, Judge. Cross examination begins with Kathy Shank, Mr. Andy Baldwin doing the questioning for the defense. I have just a few questions. Is it okay to call, what would you like me to call you? Kathy's fine. Kathy's fine. Thank you. My name's Andy Baldwin. Good to see you. Thank you. You have no idea if the information on exhibit, the third page, I should say, of exhibit 228, which is this sheet. Yes. You have no idea if the information on there is accurate, do you? I wasn't there. No. You don't know if the person that reported here said I was on the bridge from 12:30 to 1:30 or off of the bridge. You don't know any. I wasn't privy to that conversation. No. So, again, like I said, Richard Allen always said, and we watched it in his interview that came out after the trial. He never said he was at the bridge from 1:30 to 3:30. He always maintained 12:30 to 1:30. So he was always saying that he was there before the girls even got there. So I think they got there after 1:30. I wasn't trying. He said I wasn't privy to that conversation. No, she said that. Sorry. And in fact, there could be a mistake there. Would you agree it's possible? Anything. Objection, Judge. It calls for speculation. Sustained. There was a mistake made in the case related to the Richard Whiteman, correct? That's not, well, you don't know who that is. There is no Richard Whiteman, correct? I don't know. Well, I don't know that there's not a Richard Whiteman, but that wasn't the proper name okay. And I was trying to figure out who made that mistake. Was that you or was it the other person, the person that drafted the report? Do you know? I don't know. It wasn't me. I just wrote what was on the report. So somebody made a mistake on Dan Dulin's report. Is that correct? I'm trying to understand. I believe the initial entry from what I read, which would be the first one that says cleared on it, not the second page, but the second page, not the third, that initial entry was made Richard Allen Whiteman. And you don't know who did that. No, I wasn't there. I didn't come until March 1st. You don't know who, if the police entered that, if somebody else entered it. You just don't know. Objection, Judge. Asked and answered. Sustained. You said you are an organizer. Is that correct? I hope to be. Yes. And details matter to you. Most generally, yes. Accuracy matters to you. Well, as best I can control, yes. Especially when the stakes are high, like when you worked for what they called in the old days welfare, correct? DCS, yes, correct. DCS now, the Department of Child Services. Those details matter. Of course they do. And they mattered in the Abby and Libby death investigation as well. Of course they did. Just so the jury understands, because there's got some stuff in here that they may not know about, like Orion. That's on the third page, or yeah, on the third page, kind of in that there's a thing that says Orion right here, if you can see that. Yes, I can see it. Do you know what Orion is? Yes, I do. What is Orion? It's basically a database. Okay. Is that the database you were putting information into? Yes. Okay. So I just want to be clear because I'm a little confused and I'm not and I just want to be unconfused, okay? So when there was a point in time where you were putting tips sorry, there was a point in time when you were putting tips into Orion? Yes, sir. And but is that different than narrative reports? Yes, sir. Okay, can you describe the difference between tips and narrative reports? Well, sir, tips are when we would receive at or when we would receive at there was an Abby Williams and Libby German tip line. The tips would come in through email. We did not have phone tips. They were coming in through email, and I was privy to receiving those in my work email. And as I would receive those, I would enter those into the database. I see. All right. And so that's tips. That's tips. The other one was narrative. What's narrative? I called them narrative summaries. Some people might call them reports. Narrative summaries work better for my lingo with the database. When a report was completed by an officer, so the tip is just a tip, like anybody who took, all the tips came in by email, I should say. So there's just a bunch of emails from people. This is the narrative summary that she's calling it is when the officer has done their, at least their initial interview with the person giving the tip, and then they write up a narrative. So that's, I believe, the difference here. So she says when a report was completed by an officer, when they had talked with someone of interest, written a report, then that was given to me to enter into a certain section of the database called covered leads. And I would literally type that in and enter it into there, and there it would be saved. And I believe that was what was done prior to me with the narrative in there. Yes. Okay. hmm And is the narrative report section in Orion? Yes, sir. And the tip is also in Orion? Yes, sir. And you did both? Yes, sir. All right. And on page 3 of 228, this is not a tip, it sounds like to me. That is more of a narrative report. Is that correct? The bottom part is yes, the top part was considered a tip that was entered to generate a lead, which would generate the narrative report. That was kind of the hierarchy of that, if that helps you understand. Kind of the combo of the two, a little bit. That's the hierarchy. It would be a tip entered, and then if the tip was deemed to be made a lead, it would be that would be generated in the database, and then the lead would be assigned not by me, but it would be assigned, and then that would be followed up by talking with the person of interest where the tip had come in, and then they would make a report, or as I called it, a narrative summary. Why don't you just call it a report then? It's just easier. And then I would receive that and I would enter it into the database. Okay. You're doing a great job of explaining. Do you know which came first or did they come at the same time? Page 2, where it says lead cleared, or page 3, where the narrative report is at the bottom? I really couldn't tell you. It was put in this file. That's all I can tell you. Okay. You did see lots and lots, hundreds, thousands of tips, correct? Yes, sir. There was, to your knowledge, no other tip, if that is even called a tip, concerning Richard Allen? That is correct. And there was no other tip, to your knowledge, concerning even a Richard Whiteman? That is correct. Not to my knowledge, no, not that I ever saw. But you said that one of the things that piqued your interest was that there was a girl that had seen a guy on the trail. Is that right? A girl that had seen a man on the trail on February 13th of 2017 at the approximate same time and place and time that Richard Allen had self-reported he had been on the trails from 1:30 to 3:30. Do you know? Oh, I'm sorry. Do you remember if that tip described the guy as tall and muscular? At that time, I did not pursue that part of it. I just saw time, place, date, and that's why I correlated these two. I wasn't looking because the initial self report of Mr. Allen didn't have any description of him, so that was not my concern at the time. So you wouldn't have known it was that person was with three other girls? Or, no, I didn't. It just seems to be because place and time, same date, he had self-reported. They had said it was between those hours. I thought, well, maybe it's something we need to look at. And that's how it happened. Really strong policing there. That's a good way to arrest your perp. Oh, yeah, I think he said this, and this person or these people said that. This is all hearsay, by the way. So then it must be this guy's guilty. Okay. Now on page 2, his phone number, Mr. Rick Allen Whiteman, is shown in the middle section, correct? I think so. A little above that midsection, 612, something or other. Let's see. Yeah, I see it right here. Richard Allen Whiteman with a phone number. Yes, sir, I see it. So even the name, though the name was wrong, the phone number, well, you don't know if that was right. I was just putting names on files at that time. Gotcha. You said on direct examination there were lots of police that at the beginning and then kind of whittled down over time. Yes, sir. Were there lots of different agencies involved in interacting with you? Yes, sir. County police? Yes. Delphi local police. Tony Liggett, for example. Well, Tony's Carroll County, but oh, Carroll County. Yes. Steve Mullen. Did you see him? Steve was the chief of police at the time, and yes, he was there. So we've got Delphi local police, Carroll County police, state police? Yes, sir. Jerry Holman. Yes, Jerry was there. Some others? Some others, yes, sir. And then FBI as well. I believe so. I was not privy initially to working with any of law enforcement. I was downstairs, they were upstairs, and all I did was go upstairs and ask for a detective to come down and speak with someone. Well, you said on direct, though, that once you moved into a certain building, it was more of a cohesive group. I was still in the back room. I wasn't out in the main room with them, and basically, again, was just doing what I was assigned to do. I wasn't part of the team at that time. But yet, you recognized that there was a cohesive group of law enforcement. There was yes, absolutely. And was FBI involved in that cohesive group of law enforcement, if you know? Objection, Judge. It's been asked and answered. She already said she was working in the back and did not have direct knowledge. Sustained. That's not what she said. She didn't say she didn't have direct knowledge. That's just putting falsities out there, Ms. Diener. But of course, Judge Gull sustained it. Judge, she said that she recognized it was a cohesive group, and I think is how she put it. I want to explore it. She says, and you have. Sustained. No, you haven't. I haven't let you. Sustained. You said there were 14,000 tips and narrative tips just in. Was that in the file cabinets? I said through the database there was. When I would put in tips, I would notice this is your number, and I'm paraphrasing there. Yeah. And the last time I actually looked, it showed for me 14,000 plus tips I had entered over the years. Well, you don't know if it ended up being 100,000 or, well, obviously they dwindled down over the years. They were coming in really, by the droves initially, but they started dwindling down some. But yes, I know there were 14,000 at one time. Yes. And the tip, not too long ago. I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you. The tips that you would receive, some of them would be because I've seen some of these. Quote, this guy sounds or the guy on the bridge sounds like my neighbor, as examples. She says, yes. So the guy looks like my neighbor? Yes, sir. Looks like my brother in law? Yes, sir. Yeah, lots of people look like the guy on the bridge in these tips. Yes, sir. Lots of people sounded like the guy on the bridge. Yes, sir. Did you have any memory of tips of a man in his 20s with brown, fluffy hair? Sir, I had so many. To ask me about individual ones, I just don't know that I could tell you that honestly. Well, you would remember if there was a tip about somebody walking down the road bloody, I would presume. I would imagine so, yes. Did you see any tips about a man walking down 300 North westbound with blood all over him as if he'd slaughtered a pig? I want to answer this honestly. I can't tell you that I remember a tip. I remember reading about that. That's the best I can tell you. Thank you. So, September of 2022 is when you handed this file over to Tony Liggett. September 21st of 2022. Correct. And at that time, Mr. Liggett was running for sheriff of Carroll County. And there we have it. Political motives as to why you might want to solve a crime. Liggett was running for sheriff. He was a whatever deputy, and now he's running for sheriff right before this tip breaks. She says, yes, sir. Objection, Judge, outside the scope of direct. Sustained. I want to just clear up kind of a verbiage that you used when you said Richard Allen self reported. I want to make sure he didn't self report and say, quote, I took those girls' lives, correct? That isn't, when you said self reported, well, that isn't the statement that I read on the lead sheet. No, sir. I understand that, and I'm not trying to, but when you said self reporting, you just mean, he reported that himself. Yeah, that he had been out on the trail, that he had been on, yes, sir. So the one, if you want to call it a tip or a narrative report that came in that day related to Richard Allen was Richard Allen himself. So the tip that you received about Richard Allen was from Richard Allen himself. She says Richard Allen had come in and self-reported that on February 13th of 2017 that he had been on the trails between 1:30 and 3:30 and saw three girls, as I recall. Yes. Thank you very much. I appreciate it. She says, you're certainly welcome. Mr. Baldwin says, no other questions. He really should have hit home again that 1:30 and 3:30 because she kept repeating it. Baldwin should have kept hitting home that the 1:30 and 3:30, every time she said it, is based on a report that somebody else wrote. So there's human error there. Somebody else wrote that based on verbal words that he heard. He could have heard it wrong. He could have wrote it down wrong. He could have done something wrong. It could have been right. And then she entered it wrong. So there's two levels of it could have gone wrong at some point in time during the uh, entering of this tip. And uh, there's many reasons to believe that the 1:30 to 3:30 is not accurate. So there's that. All right, we are going to begin redirect of Kathy Shank. All right, Ms. Diener says, now you've described that there became a time when you were receiving tips by email and entering them into a database, which was now been established as Orion. Correct. Did you do that from the very beginning? No. Was it years later or months later, after March 1st, 2017, that you started to do that? I didn't begin entering tips until we had moved to the city building, which I think we'd been at the REMC possibly for a year or so. So there were a lot. So I don't have the direct date, but it was when we moved to the city building. There were lots of tips processed before you had any access or knowledge of tips that you entered. Oh, absolutely. Yes, many. And you did not go back and read all those, did you? Oh, no, no. And if there are people identified that might be talked to from a roadblock, did that information get given to you to enter into the tip line? No, I think those had already been entered. By someone else? By someone else. It's difficult to remember. That's been a long time ago, and I entered so many. I might have, if there had been a narrative summary, I might have added to that in the narrative summary that I may not have entered it as a tip. I honestly don't recall for that. I don't recall that for sure. Okay, no other questions. Mr. Baldwin has recross. So, to your knowledge, Richard Allen came forward according to this report to assist in the investigation? Objection, Judge. Speculation. Sustained. No other questions. Thank you. All right. Does anybody on the jury have any questions for Ms. Shank? Okay, I see one. All right, counsel, if you'd approach. And now we go to a brief sidebar. The court reads the question. How did you determine the name was incorrect? Mr. Baldwin says, that's a good question. The court says, they've been asking some great questions. Ms. Diener says, smart jury, I like them. Court says, and they're paying very close attention. They are, says Ms. Diener. Sidebar conference concluded. Ms. Uh, Judge Gull reads the question with the jury now and the gallery, everybody listening. Ma'am, how did you determine the name was correct? I determined the name was correct when I had gone to my file and I saw that the name written in the narrative summary was Richard Allen. And from being from this area, I knew there was a Whiteman Drive, and I believe it said Richard Allen of Whiteman Drive. And I put that together that way. Ms. Diener? Ms. Diener has a follow-up question, and that was in September of 2022. Yes, when you were going through the box of items that you had not gotten to from earlier on, when I pulled the file. But the reason you pulled the file was because I had seen that lead going through the box. Yes, correct. Thank you. Mr. Baldwin? No other questions. Thank you. All right. Thank you, Ms. Shank. You may step down. The witness says thank you. Court says you may call your next witness. And Mr. McLeland says, Your Honor, the state of Indiana would call Department of Natural Resources Officer Dan Dulin. Department of Natural Resources Officer. So that is, I don't know what that's about. So let's find out. All right. All right. Mr. McLeland says, Mr. Dulin, before we get started, I'm going to ask you to speak up and use your best outside voice. You don't need to lean into the microphone. The microphone amplifies for the audience, but not for the attorneys and for the jurors. So I just need you to speak up as best you can. Okay, fair enough? Yes, sir. Will you state your name, please? My name is Daniel Dulin. And Mr. Dulin, how are you employed? I am a conservation officer with the Indiana Department of Natural Resources Law Enforcement Division. I'm so confused how this Department of Natural Resources got involved, but okay. And how long have you been employed as a DNR officer? This is my 26th year. And what is your rank currently? It's captain. Captain Dulin, did you have to go through special training and or schooling to become a law enforcement officer with the Department of Natural Resources? Yes, sir, I did. Can you tell me a little bit about that? Conservation officers attend a recruit school where they learn a lot about natural resource laws and the primary duties of conservation officers. Upon completing that, we attend the Indiana Law Enforcement Academy like any other law enforcement officer to get the criminal law, the traffic law, the defensive tactics, everything that's associated with being a law enforcement officer in Indiana. And then we participate in a several month long field training portion of our training where we interact with seasoned or training officers to get us trained on how to perform in the field as a conservation officer. And so, are your primary duties to enforce the Department of Natural Resources laws? So, our primary duties are DNR, property enforcement, resource laws like hunting and fishing, boating, off-road vehicles, But our duties include a lot of traditional law enforcement. We have authority to enforce any law in Indiana, anywhere in Indiana, as a state law enforcement officer. So they're kind of like a state cop, but they also do this other thing, which is resource law, hunting, fishing, boating, off road vehicles, property enforcement. So stuff like that, keeping people off properties that aren't supposed to be there, whatever. And have you performed all of those duties during your career here in Carroll County? Not all in Carroll County. I have worked throughout the state. I was assigned the first 15 years of my career in Newton County, and I've been in Carroll County for about 10 years now. I want to take you back to February of 2017. Were you employed in the same capacity that you're employed now? No, sir. At that time, I was a lieutenant. I was in charge of a district, the district of the Lafayette office. So, some law enforcement responsibilities, just a different assignment. And at some point in 2017, did you become involved in the investigation in the death of Abby and Libby? Yes, sir, I did. When did that, or when did you become involved? I believe it was on the 16th of February, 2017? Yes, sir. And when you initially came on to that investigation, what was your role? My role was basically to assist the investigation team in any way that they needed. And when you started, how did you assist? I had been out of town through the 14th or 15th of February, so my first day back to work was the 16th, I believe, and I went to the command center. I offered my services of however they needed to. I kind of received a briefing of the basics of the case, and then I began assisting by following up on whatever they asked me to follow up on, and if they didn't have a specific task for me that day, then I would just follow up on the leads that they had received. When did you first start following up on leads that they had received? I believe it was the 18th of February of 2017. Yes, sir. Tell me how that process worked. How would you follow up on a lead? So there was always a briefing in the morning. I would attend the briefing in the morning. We'd get updates on the case. They would have leads printed out, lead sheets printed out, and they would just distribute those to the officers that were following on up on the leads. The role was we would follow up on the lead, make contact with the person somebody had reported or self reported, and we'd make contact with them in person, ask them why somebody might have called them in, find out where they were on the 13th of February between whatever times, try to obtain. Well, let me try to back you up. Let me slow you down just a little bit. When you got a lead sheet, what information was in the lead sheet? They were pretty basic. It would be, the name of the individual we needed to follow up on, usually a way to contact them, either an address or phone number, and then whatever the person that reported the lead, a basic sentence or two about why they felt this person was pertinent or why they needed somebody to follow up on. I would love to see all the tips on the third party suspects because the only tip on Richard Allen was Richard Allen himself telling the police that he was at the trail that day. But I would like to know, the Brad Holder, Jesse Messers, Elvis Fields, uh, all of those guys. Logan, Ron Logan, him too. I said Brad Holder. Logan Holder, his son. Where are the tips on those people? I want to know. I want to see those because I bet you there's way more of them than there are of Richard Allen. I would just venture to take a guess. So, a short sentence or two of information about, I guess, the content of the lead or the subject of the lead. Yes, sir. And then you would take that lead and the lead sheet and make contact with the person on the lead sheet. Yes, sir. And how many of these were you doing a day? That would vary because I would also have other tasks as being somebody that was local to the area and familiar with the area, so it wasn't every day that I did leads. There might be something that they needed me to follow up on with somebody locally, or an investigator might ask me to try to track down a case report or a some court information from a different person that they were looking into. So I would help out in those administrative tasks as well, like finding court documents and things. Geez, or like arrest records and stuff, doing like background checks on people. And then it also depended on how complex the lead was. There were times when a lead was check with this person and get their story for the day and then turn it back in. And then there were also situations where they would say, look into this lead and then follow it through until you have completed the investigation into this person. So, so let's explain those two different kinds of leads. On certain lead sheets, you're told to make contact with the person, gather that information, and then turn that lead back in. Yes, sir. That's correct. On other leads, you were told to contact the person, follow up with the lead, and follow that lead as far as you could follow it. Yes, sir. That's correct. And those are the two kinds of leads, the different kinds of leads that you dealt with? Yes, sir. Okay. Do you recall getting a lead sheet concerning Richard Allen? Yes, sir. I received a lead sheet. Well, hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. You're getting ahead of me here. Sorry. I want to show you what's been marked. He asked the question. I want to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 229. Can you describe just what that is to the jury? So this would be the original lead sheet that contains the person who was the reporting person, how they contact investigators. It would have a brief narrative which explains why this person either needs to be contacted or wants to be contacted by law enforcement, and then it would have administrative information on it, like the lead number, the status, or the disposition of the lead. And so, do you recognize this as a lead sheet that you would follow up on? Yes, sir, I do. And do you recognize this as a lead sheet concerning Richard Allen? Yes, sir. Judge, I would move to admit what's been marked as State's Exhibit 229. Mr. Rosie says no objection. The court says, all right, without objection, 229 is admitted. McClellan says, I'll ask permission to publish. Judge says, you may. Thank you. Captain Dulin, I'm going to have you hold up a lead sheet. As you're identifying the lead sheet, you identified different sections of the lead sheet. Is that correct? Yes, sir. I'm going to have you hold up this lead sheet now that it's been admitted into evidence, and explain to the jury the different sections that you're talking about. So the top section under the heading of the work package is it just simply explains who received the lead and likely who created it in the system. The source of information is the person who's reporting the lead, and in this case, it indicates Rick Allen Whiteman. The narrative section is the brief summary of what I'm supposed to inquire about, and then the bottom portion I would describe as the disposition portion, and it gives the identifying number, the status of the lead or the disposition of the lead, who it is provided to, and then again, a description of what I'm supposed to do and find out when I meet with the person listed above. Thank you, Captain. And is this the lead sheet that you picked up, or is this identified as the lead sheet that you picked up to investigate? Yes, sir. And do you know when you picked up this lead sheet? It would have been on February 18th, 2017. And after you picked up the lead sheet, what did you do next? I would have made contact with the persons I'm supposed to contact by the phone number provided on the lead sheet. Well, let's specifically focus on this lead sheet concerning Richard Allen. What did you do once you picked it up? Once you picked up the lead sheet, I contacted him by phone. And how did you have his phone number? It was listed on the lead sheet. And did you speak with him? Yes, sir. And typically, when you would call someone on a lead sheet, where would you meet them? Well, my first preference would be to meet them at their house. And what was the second preference? at one of the law enforcement facilities in the county where we have an opportunity to have an interview room available. And when you called Richard Allen, did you request to come to his house? Yes, sir. Did you request to meet him at one of the law enforcement facilities? Yes, sir. Did he deny both of those requests? Yes, sir. So we must have done it then. Where did he want to meet you? He wanted to meet me at the grocery store parking lot. And why did that stick out in your mind? It just, again, typically my preference is to meet somebody at their house. And since he was the caller of the lead, I felt like I would just go to his house. It wasn't far away. We'd ask a couple of questions, figure out what I needed to gather for my lead, and then move on from that point. Maybe he was heading to work and this was the more convenient place and time for him. I mean, it's not all about you, sir. The person giving the tip, maybe he doesn't want to be inconvenienced, and maybe he feels awkward and weird and doesn't want to come down to a police station and doesn't want a cop in his house. I don't know. This is like, some people don't want to get involved in things like this. And to my knowledge, I don't believe Richard Allen wanted to get involved right away, and it kind of nagged at him for a couple days until he finally did call and say that he was there, and his wife kind of talked him into it, from what I understand, because he was probably scared. Maybe for this reason. Maybe he had some kind of intuition holding him back from going to the cops because maybe he knew something horrible was going to happen from it. I fully believe that. Like our consciousness, you know, subconsciously, he might have known. And that was why he was hesitating in real life. I don't know. Anyways, I believe in that stuff. Um, So he was suspicious because he didn't want to meet him at the police station or have him come to his house, whatever. Now, on the lead, it says Richard Allen Whiteman, correct? That's correct. When you spoke to him on the phone, did you address him as Richard Allen Whiteman? I don't recall exactly how the phone conversation went. At some point, oh, sorry, I don't remember how the phone conversation went, period. At some point, did you find out that his name wasn't Richard Allen Whiteman? Yes, sir. When did that happen? I believe it would be when we met in person. Okay, so you did meet him in person, correct? Yes, sir. Yes. And you met him in the, I think you said grocery store parking lot? Yes, sir. What happened next? We just had a conversation about the lead. I went through the lead that he reported. It indicated that he was on the trail between 1 and 3 p.m. So it went from 1:30 to 3:30 to now 1 to 3. Do you see how it's already changed from witness to witness? I mean, that's a big difference. When you're talking about mere minutes in a crime scene, a 30-minute window is a big deal. In this case, I mean, it's still wrong. It's incorrect. This 1 to 3 is not what Richard Allen said at all, but it still is a discrepancy from what Kathy Shank says. So, anyways, he says it indicated that he was on the trail between 1 and 3, so we went through those details. At the time that we met, he indicated that it was more, he changed it to being there at 1:30 to 3:30. So he just basically adjusted the times by a half hour later in each direction. That's not even the time he said. And did he confirm that he was there on February 13th of 2017? Yes, sir, he did. But the time was adjusted instead of 1 to 3. It was 1:30 to 3:30? Yes, sir. What else did he tell you? As the lead sheet indicates, I was supposed to find out if he had seen anybody else in the trail that day or anything that could have been suspicious, and he indicated that he saw 3 girls at the Freedom Bridge at the beginning of his hike, but then saw nobody else after that. So he saw 3 girls. Remember, there were other groups of people out that day, hanging out on the trail. Not necessarily on the bridge, but on the trail itself. There were people hanging out because it was supposedly a nice day. People wanted to get out. That's the thing to do, apparently, in Delphi. So that's what they were doing. Did he give you an indication of where he parked that day when he went on to the trails? Yes. And where did he tell you? I documented that he said that he parked at the Farm Bureau parking lot. I believe is what I documented. And then I'm not sure if he told me that or if I documented the wrong name of the building, but we had a conversation about it and it was clear that he had parked at the old office building on the east side of the Heartland, which would be commonly known as the DCS office, the old DCS office. Again, that's weird how DCS is coming into the trial. Like, there's a lot of things that are on repeat in this trial, like repetitive words, themes. Just kind of odd to me. We're seeing. Anyways, did he tell you where he walked once he got into the trails? He indicated that he walked from his vehicle to what we call the Freedom Bridge, the Blue Bridge, which is where he saw the three girls. And then he walked towards the High Bridge. And did he notify you if he had seen anybody else on the trail besides the three girls that he indicated? No, sir. He indicated that he did not see anybody else and he was not paying attention really to his surroundings because he was looking at a stock ticker on his phone as he walked. Remember the other witnesses too, Brienne, Wilbur, and can't remember the other girl's name, who were friends with Kaylee and said that they happened to be walking down, or not Kaylee, Kelsey, friends with Kelsey, Libby's sister. And they said that they happened to be walking back from where they were, from their like little hike up and down the trail. And they were coming back towards their cars or whatever. And they saw a man who was all black, dressed in black, and neither one of them could give the same description of the guy, but they were supposedly together. And I think there were only the two of them. So again, it was two females in that group. And so Richard Allen is saying that he saw a group of three females, three girls, like teenage or preteen aged girls. So they're not the same. Like whoever he saw isn't the same people that have already testified to seeing some creepy rando bridge guy or whatever, in my opinion. And did he notify you if he had seen anybody else on the trail besides the three girls? No, sir. He indicated that he did not see anybody else and he was not paying attention, just paying attention to his phone ticker, stock ticker on his phone. Now, as you're talking to Richard Allen, how are you recording what he's telling you? So I'm taking notes on the back of the lead sheet. So, I mean, it was a pretty brief encounter. I would say no longer than 10 minutes. I just flipped over the lead sheet that I had and I handwrite notes as he's talking. Did you video record it? No, sir, I did not. Did you record it in some kind of audio device? No, sir, I did not. Why did you not do that? I don't know if I didn't have my voice recorder with me that day. I don't know. It was one of the first leads that I conducted. If I had not started using the voice recorder yet, I recorded several of the investigations that I conducted. Especially if the lead turned into a full investigation on a person, I recorded those interactions. I was to double check to make sure I don't have any recordings of the event. I've checked my phones, I've checked my files, and I found no recordings of the interaction. But as you're interacting with Richard Allen, you are taking notes? Absolutely. Now, before you ended the conversation with Mr. Allen, did you gain additional information from him? Yes, sir. And what was that concerning? So I asked him for his phone information. And he noted that he had his phone information with him that day? Yes. And you gathered his phone information that you could at that time. Is that correct? Yes, sir. For the phone that he had with him that day. Did you include the MEID number? Yes, sir, that sounds correct. And what did that include? The MEID hex number? Did that include that number? Yes, sir. That sounds accurate. Once you concluded the interview with Richard Allen, what did you do next? So after the interview was conducted, I would have taken my notes, I would have transferred them or typed them into a Word document that I would then like a summary and that I would turn into the investigation center. I would have ran his driver's license information and printed that off and a picture, a BMV picture, DMV? DMV picture from my computer and printed that off. And when I submitted a packet back to the investigation center, it included my notes, the person that I was investigating, their driver's license information, and their DMV picture. I'm going to show you what's been marked as States Exhibit 230 and 231. Start with States Exhibit 230. Can you describe that, please? Sir, this would have been a Word document that I would have taken. Sorry, this would have been a Word document that I would have taken my handwritten notes and put on a Word document that I would have turned into the investigation center as my completed, lead. So he typed it up. He typed up his notes. And specifically, are these the notes from your interview with Richard Allen? Yes, sir, they are. And when did you create this Word document from your notes that you gathered at the interview? It would have been within an hour, or like I would have left the parking lot, likely drove to the fire department across the street from the city building and sat in the parking lot and typed my notes immediately after the interview. The same day as the interview? Yes, sir. That's how you're supposed to do it. Remember in Karen Reed there were like reports and things that were uh done like way later. This is how you're supposed to do it. You have an interview with someone. It wasn't audio recorded. It wasn't video recorded. All you did was take handwritten notes. You better get your butt into an office or somewhere and type up those notes right away because that's how you're supposed to do it when your memory's fresh and you can do that. Okay. I want to draw your attention to what's been marked as States Exhibit 231. Can you describe what that is? It was Mr. Allen's driver's license return that I would have gotten on my computer, my car computer, and the DMV photo that I would have obtained from my car computer. Was it common practice for you to do that while you were investigating these leads? Yes, sir. And is that in fact the BMW? I'm just going to call it DMV because BMV, I don't know what that is. I'm sure that's what they do in Indiana, but that's stupid. So sorry, Indiana. And is that, in fact, the DMV summary that you ran for Richard Allen after you conducted the interview with him? Yes, sir. Judge, the state would move to admit what's been marked as State's Exhibit 231 and, sorry, 230 and 231. Mr. Rosie says, is this my copy? Mr. McClellan says yes. Mr. Rosie says, 1 second, Your Honor, Judge. I don't have any objection to 230. 231, I don't have any objection to it. There's a social security number on there that probably ought to be redacted. Court says we can redact it. Mr. Rosie says, the media is going to get their hands on this at some point, and otherwise, I don't have any objection to it. Court says, all right, I'll show 230 and 231 admitted without objection. But they shouldn't admit it until you get the redacted portion, right? I don't know. Whatever. Judge, I would ask to Mr. McClellan says, Judge, I would ask to publish to the jury 230. What I'll do is, if the court would allow me, I'll mark out the social security number and make it a copy so that you can't see through it. And then I would just ask to publish that to the jury at a later time. Court says, okay. Mr. McClellan says, you may proceed. Or, sorry, the court says, you may proceed, Mr. McClelland. Mr. McClelland says, thank you, Your Honor. Captain Dulin, I want to back up just a little bit. I have an omitted question I forgot to ask. When you spoke to Richard Allen, he notified you, or he told you, that he ran into three young girls near the Freedom Bridge? Yes, sir. And he was headed towards the Monon High Bridge? Yes, sir. Did he give you an indication of which direction the three girls were headed? Not that I recall. Okay, after you completed the interview with Richard Allen, you've done your Word document, you ran the BMV information. After you've gathered all of that, what do you do? What did you do next? I make essentially a packet of the lead information that was provided to me, and I put my Word document and then I put the BMV information and photo and staple it together, and I return it to the command center. I provide the phone information to the investigators that were working on the technology aspect of the case, and then I submit the leads the blah, blah, blah. I submit the lead sheet and packet to back in the command center. On this particular lead, is this a lead that you followed up on after that? No, sir. So after that initial interview in the uh, in the grocery center shopping uh, par- parking lot, I can't remember what I'm saying right now. In the parking lot of the shopping center, that was the last time that he spoke with Richard Allen. He did not follow up. So this is not a lead that you followed all the way to fruition or all the way as far as you could take it. No, sir. This is the lead of the first kind, where you gathered the initial information and dropped it back off at the command center. That's correct. I want to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit 232. Do you recognize this document? Yes, sir. And what do you recognize that as? This would have been after I submitted my information back to the investigation center. That was a bad question. Let me stop you. What is this? This is essentially an updated lead sheet. So you recognize the top half as a lead sheet? Yes, sir. And this specifically is the lead sheet that you picked up involving Richard Allen. The top half, yes, sir. But this has additional information on it, as opposed to the State's Exhibit 229. Is that correct? Yes, sir, that's correct. What additional information is on this? So there's a disposition included in this lead sheet where somebody has taken my narrative that I submitted in a Word document and then retyped it into the Orion system that they were using to track leads. And it's printed on my information that somebody retyped is printed on the bottom of the lead sheet. And you've had an opportunity to review this document prior to court today, correct? Yes, sir. And you've seen this document before? Yes, sir. And does the narrative in the disposition accurately reflect your Word document that you turned in with the lead? Yes, sir. Judge, the state would move to admit what's been marked as State's Exhibit 232. No objection, says Mr. Rosie. The court says, all right, without objection, 232 is admitted. Mr. McLeland says, going to ask to permission to publish to the jury, please. You may. And then you may proceed. Thank you, Your Honor. Captain Dulin, I now want to fast forward to September of 2022. What happened during that time? I was at my office working on some administrative work and I received a call from Investigator Mullen asking if I recalled my interactions with Richard Allen. And after he asked you that, what did you do? I told him I had. Like the name didn't sound familiar to me. I said, however, I'm at my office and I have a binder, several binders with all the information that all of the conservation officers had conducted during the time period, and I would look for whatever I could find. And did you look through those binders? I did eventually. Actually, the first thing that I did was there's a little search bar at the bottom left of your computer. I just typed in Richard Allen and it immediately brought up my Word narrative that I had submitted that you had in the exhibit earlier in my computer. So I knew obviously that I had interacted with him, and then I went and found my binder and found the lead packet that I would have submitted the day of February 18th. After reviewing those things, did it help refresh your memory about the interview with Mr. Allen? Yes, sir, it did. After you did that, what did you do next? I met with the investigators, Investigator Mullen, at the investigation center in Delphi. I brought the documents that I had from the case, and just to let them know that here's what I remember from it, and here are the documents that I have in my file. After you did that, did you do any further research on Richard Allen? Yes. Knowing that they were obviously looking into information on Mr. Allen, I utilized some of the resources we have at the DNR to find information on Mr. Allen. Well, what resources do you have available at the DNR? What resources do you look at to find information? So it's called our point of scale system. It's our outdoor licensing system. So anybody who buys a fishing license or a hunting license checks in a deer or a turkey, it goes into a database. Well, let me stop you. What information or what kind of information is put into that database when you purchase a fishing license or hunting license or turkey license? Yeah, so the physical information that's put into the system would be your name, your phone number, email, your address, your height, your weight, physical information. And then it also contains, every license that somebody has ever bought over the last 10 to 15 years back to when we started using that system. Why on earth does the government track like how many fish or turkeys you kill? Like, why? Do they need to know that? That is ridiculous. This earth is meant for us to use as a resource, and humans can live off of the earth and do that without the government, or should be able to do that without the government making you register a license every time you try to go get yourself a meal. Like, this is ridiculous. I'm sorry. I've lived in like cities my whole life, so it's like a new thing to me that like people just live off of the land, and I'm loving it, and I wish I could figure out how to do that myself. So I don't know. This is ridiculous to me that total sidetrack, and I'm sorry, but our government has way too much effing control. They have to get your height, your weight, your physical information. Like, why? Because I went fishing? Shouldn't I just be able to do that like without the government knowing and making me, requiring me to have all this BS, whatever. Okay, moving on. You get my point. I think a 15-year database of anybody that's, sustaining themselves off of the land is ridiculous. But that's what we have because that's our government. Moving on. You guys can't hate your government enough. I'm just telling you that what they do to us, you can't. In this case is clear sign of why you can't hate your government enough. I'm sure there's great government officials out there that really do have good intentions, but the majority of our system is corrupt. And the more people that realize that, the better, because most people just blindly trust the government, the system. The system will just work. It'll just work itself out. Everything will just work out because it's a system, right? Well, no. If there's no checks and balances on your system and the people who are doing the checks and balances are corrupt, then all we have is a corrupt system. And there's my little tirade about government. Let's move on. Sorry. And did you utilize this database on that day to search Richard Allen? Yes, sir. Tell me what you found. So I was able to locate phone number, email addresses. I located something that stuck out to me that was that on April 1st. Well, let me stop you. Were you able to locate various fishing licenses? Yes, sir. For whom? I located fishing licenses for Mr. Allen and his wife. Because you want to fish, you have to get a license. I think that's just ridiculous. And did those fishing licenses let me back up. Did the fishing licenses pertaining to Richard Allen, did they have identification information within them? Yes, sir. What kind of information did they have in them? So it has, again, his name, his address, phone number, height, weight, date of birth. Are you able to view these various fishing licenses that have been acquired over the years? Yes. Are you able to view them in a way that you can compare one to another? Not necessarily compare them to each other from the initial screen, but I had asked the administrator of the program to pull information from the database that I thought might be helpful from a historical standpoint. So that would have, what credit card he used, what the IP address was, when he was online buying the license, if there was changing in emails. But that secondary search also includes any changes that he made in his profile, like his physical profile. What changes are made in the profile? Is that something the administrator within the Department of Natural Resources does, or is that something that the person purchasing the license does? It's something the person purchasing the license does. And what stuck when you were reviewing those fishing licenses that Richard Allen had purchased and acquired, what stuck out to you about that information? So when he purchased his fishing license on April 1st, he changed his height from 5'6" or from 5'4" to 5'6". He increased his height? Yes, sir. He grew 2 inches. Yes, sir. April 1st of what year? It was 2017. So April 1st of 2017 is when the change was made? Yes. Well, there you have it. He is obviously guilty of homicide because he changed his height on a fishing license by 2 inches, guys. The state cracked it. This Captain Dulin cracked it. He figured it out. Richard Allen, guilty because he changed his height. Wow. That's what they're going with. Did you notice any other changes to his physical appearance that he made on that license? He decreased his weight. Oh my God. Put him away forever. He lowered his weight on his license. He tried to make himself taller and thinner in his fishing license. Is there a crime there? Like, seriously. This is what we're using to convict someone. This is so ridiculous. I probably should end this because I'm getting annoyed. Like, really annoyed. So he decreased his weight. Okay. And so were there other changes that he made to that license besides his height and weight? Not that I recall. Why did the change in height and weight? Well, let me back up. Is it fair to say that sometimes people change their height and weight on fishing licenses? Absolutely. Why did this stick out? Why did you make note of this? I just thought it was uncommon for an adult to increase their height 2 inches as opposed to, I mean, as we age, we might get a little shorter, but to grow 2 inches just seems an anomaly to me. Did the date those changes made in correlation with the date of the murders influence you at all? It was in the back of my mind that I'd spoke with him a month and a half prior, and then he changed his weight 2 inches, or height 2 inches. Okay, but Bridge Guy was tall, muscular build, much taller than 5'4". So if Richard Allen, same year as the murders, he changes his height to increase his height 2 inches to be closer to the perpetrator's height, that makes no sense. These investigators are so dumb. The way that they interpret things to mean something that it doesn't is so crazy to me. So it was in the back of his mind that he increased his height. Is Richard Allen here in the courtroom today? Yes, sir, he is. Can you describe what he's wearing, please? He's wearing a long sleeved light blue button up shirt. And where is he seated? He's seated at the defense table. Mr. McLellan says, I don't have any other questions, Judge. Thank you. Mr. Rosie, says the court. And Mr. Rosie says, thank you, Judge. We will continue. Thank goodness, because I was getting heated in what this dude is saying. Dan, the dude, Dulin, is pretty much convicting this guy because he changed his height and weight on a fishing license and wanted to meet at a shopping center parking lot instead, or grocery parking lot, instead of at his home or in the police department. Those are the reasons we're convicting Richard Allen, this guy, anyways. That's why he's suspicious to him. These are not suspicious things. These are normal, everyday things, and you're just reading into them to make him your guy, is what I'm thinking. But that's just me. All right, so we're gonna end it here. This was another kind of long one, but I wanted to get through part of Captain Dan Doolin's testimony there because Doolin and Kathy Shanks are their testimonies kind of related, so it kind of made sense to do them together too. So, all right, so I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you. I appreciate you. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like button if you haven't done so already. Make sure you are subscribed so that you can get the notifications when these videos become available. We try to do them Monday through Friday. As you can see, sometimes there's hiccups, but I do try to get these out every day for you guys in the evenings. So thank you guys again, and I will see you in the next one. Take care. Bye now.